is encryption. Now, the chances are you guys use some level of encryption almost every single day in what you do. It's quite a common thing. But the definition from Google for what is encryption is the process of converting information or data into a code, especially to prevent unauthorized access. So it does this using what are known as encryption methods. So it works by scrambling data into a secret code that can only be unlocked with a unique digital key. So what it does is takes your data, puts it through this process, which could be to add certain characters onto the end of that data, then pass it through a manipulator of some description to jumble it all up. So if somebody were to take hold of that data, it would be absolute gibberish to them. They wouldn't be able to understand it unless they knew the encryption method and had the encryption key, so they can then decrypt that. It's a very useful, powerful tool. A lot of services out there do use it. So we are going to talk a little bit more now about how does it affect my business. So emails, if they're set up using secure encryption methods, which the majority are these days, if you're using Microsoft 365, for example, if you're using IMAP, you'll have the option to have secure or unsecure emails. And basically, when you send an email, it gets jumbled up to a bunch of rubbish and gets decrypted at the other end. So it keeps all of your information safe should somebody try and steal it. Web traffic. When you try and access certain websites and things like that, you will find that it is encrypted data that's sent from one end to the other. That's how we can secure payments online. When you make a payment using your credit card or debit card, all that information is jumbled up into absolute gibberish, fired across the internet, decrypted at the other end. So that keeps your data safe, stops it being stolen. So you'll find that your payment cards or your invoicing system probably has something built into it. So when you take a card payment, everything's jumbled up. It's just random characters until it gets decrypted at the other end. Now, the other thing is GDPR compliance. Under GDPR, we have a duty to keep data safe and secure, particularly if we're a processor or a controller of data. Now, most people in their businesses will be running something like Windows 10 Pro or Windows 11 Pro. Now, the Pro versions of Windows have a thing called BitLocker built into them, and that enables you to encrypt your entire hard drive. So if somebody walks off with your PC, they can't access the data unless they have your BitLocker key or your password. Part of GDPR compliance is making sure that that data is kept safe and secure to the best of your abilities. A lot of people running Windows 10 or 11 Pro don't use BitLocker when they really should, because it helps with your GDPR compliance. Something worth bearing in mind. A lot of companies, when they get set up, they go out and spend £300 on a laptop from PC World. That only comes with Windows 10 or 11 Home, which doesn't have that ability. Now, it is possible to upgrade to Pro, where you then get that BitLocker service included in the operating system. The other thing is VPNs. A lot of people working from home use a VPN, and that is a secure connection from point A to point B that uses encryption. So any data that's fired across there gets put into absolute gibberish, fired across the internet, decrypted at the other end, goes where it needs to go to. It's a way of keeping your data secure. So if anybody is listening to your network or your traffic, they're just going to end up with a bunch of gibberish. So how can you implement encryption if you're not using it in your daily business at the moment? So the first thing is speak to somebody like me, your friendly IT guy, because he can check your machine is running Windows 10 Pro or Home, and then we can get everything up and we can get BitLocker enabled. Windows 11 by default has to have a TPM module 2.0, which is a trusted platform module, which is basically encryption done on the motherboard rather than being software based. If you don't have one of them, you cannot have Windows 11 running on your machine. Windows 10 is less fussy. Even if you don't have a TPM module in Windows 10, you can basically tell the system that there is one in there and to use a password instead. And basically, what it does is make sure that everything is who they say they are before it allows you to access the data. So yes, first port of call is speak to your IT guy. Talk to your hosting company. Some hosting companies out there will just say, "Oh, we'll just sign into your emails using this," and it's like, "Yeah, but that's not a secure encrypted connection. So why would I use that? Because every email you send can then be visible by everybody else on the internet if they're collecting or sniffing for your data." Not a good way of doing things. Now, a lot of hosting companies will help you out and say you can either have an unsecure or you can have a secure connection. It's entirely up to you what you use. Most devices these days will operate off of a secure connection. Apple Macs tend to be a bit funny with this because they won't allow you to specify certain bits of information. That's why I generally will push people towards Microsoft, because it's much more user friendly from my point of view as an IT guy, to get everything up and running. But your hosting company should be able to give you advice on that. The other thing is make sure your systems are up to date. As I've already explained, the difference between Windows 10 and Windows 11. Windows 11 requires that TPM module. So it's worth keeping your systems and your software as up to date as possible. This will also help with things like antivirus services that will check if somebody is listening to your traffic and things like that. And I'd make that recommendation to anybody. If there's an update available, install it. And the other thing is ask others what they're doing. A lot of people are in business. We rub shoulders with each other all the time, but we don't necessarily talk about some of the things that we do behind the scenes. There's no shame or embarrassment in saying to somebody, "How do you do your invoicing? How do you do your encryption? How do you deal with your emails? How do you deal with this? What do you do for your GDPR compliance?" We're all in this together, so it's all about sharing information. And yeah, that's best practice is ask somebody who's been through it themselves will be able to give you the best advice they can. So it is definitely worth asking questions. The worst they can say is no, but most people will be willing to share because they want to help. So yeah, that's a little bit about encryption. And how you do use it most likely already in your emails and things like that, and when you make your online payments and things like that. But for your GDPR compliance, there's a lot more you can do regarding things like VPNs to secure your data as it's going from A to B. Also, making sure you're running something like BitLocker on your drive. You can get USB hard drives that a lot of people back their laptops and their desktops up to, and then they don't encrypt those hard drives, which means somebody could walk away with your laptop and get no data at all. But if they pick up your backed up hard drive, they could potentially access your data. So they are relatively expensive in comparison, but you can get them that are protected by thumbprints. You can get them that are protected by PIN codes and things like that before it'll allow you to access the data. So it's always worth investing in that sort of thing. A lot of companies don't, and it's such a shame because GDPR is such a big thing these days and is so involved. So yeah, if you do have any questions, by all means, reach out to me. I'm always happy to help and happy to have a chat. So thank you for listening to me waffling on about encryption.